Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's ConnexAmericas webinar titled Lessons Learned from Inception to Acquisition. Sorry. My name is Daniel Chatlin, and I'm honored to set the stage for an exciting session filled with insights, inspiration, and invaluable lessons for entrepreneurs and professionals in the fintech and venture capital space. Today's event is proudly sponsored by Academy and 999 Global Ventures, organization committed to fostering innovation and collaboration in the financial technology ecosystem. We are thrilled today to have with us a phenomenal keynote speaker, Edrizio de la Cruz. Thank you, Edrizio, for joining us. Co-founder and CEO of Arcus, Y Combinator Group partner and co-founder of the Founders School. Edrizio is also the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Underdog Founder. We'll put the link in the chat a little bit later. A story that encapsulates the resilience, creativity, and determination needed to succeed in today's ever-evolving business landscape. So, as you know, ConnexAmerica, maybe you've seen our previous webinars, we're building a meaningful relationship and fostering trust with clients and industry peers to bridge the gap between Latin America and Silicon Valley in particular, but also the rest of the US. We want to connect fintech leaders and tech experts to navigate the complexity of the market. We highlight also the growth potential within the US, Hispanic and Latin American markets while addressing barriers to access. And also we want to establish connections between Silicon Valley investors focused on a tailored solution for emerging markets. A quick note, our session is being recorded and you'll be able to access it on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@ConnexAmericas. So I would like also to thank our partners and advisory board for making this event possible. So you have the list here and their faces. Maybe you know some of them. I know that Patrice is connected, Victor, and so on. So thank you very much for your help and support. And feel free to connect with me and Daniel Ayala on LinkedIn for further inquiries or opportunities to collaborate. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Daniel Ayala, who will guide us through today's discussion. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone for joining. We appreciate your attention and your engagement. This is our third session since we started last year. And both Daniel and I are the co-founders of this institution, together with a very nice group of advisors that have been helping us direct ConnexAmericas. It is really my pleasure to introduce Edrizio de la Cruz. Just a wonderful writer, if I may say. I took the time to read his book. I guess he does. Okay, there we go. To read his book, and it's full of great advice, tough, direct advice to founders that are interested in entering the fintech space. Really great lessons learned and lots of insights. So highly encourage you all to take a look at his book. As I introduce him, Daniel is going to share a link with his personal page that provides a lot of detail on some of the things and some of the accomplishments that Edrizio has had, but it's really a pleasure to have him here. So with that, just a little bit of background on him. In 2023, he was the first Latino visiting partner at Y Combinator, which is quite a feat. In 2013, he co-founded Arcus, which is a company that he later sold to MasterCard. And he actually is a Dominican immigrant raised in Harlem, in the New York area, dropped out of college, joined the U.S. Air Force, became an aircraft technician to make ends meet. He came from humble beginnings, like many of us Latinos in the neighborhoods. And I really appreciated Edrizio's honesty and humbleness in how he delivered his message in the book. it strengthened me as an entrepreneur, and also as an advisor in the work that I do on an everyday basis. When he finished his stint in the Air Force, he actually returned to college, worked on Wall Street, earned his MBA at Wharton School, and without any further ado, I'll give the microphone to Edrizio to talk a little bit about himself, and we'll set up a QA session at the end. We're going to reserve about 15 to 20 minutes. If you are too shy to ask questions, just put them on the message line on the chat. And if you want to raise your hand and ask the question, you can do that as well. I don't know if we can do that on the webinar, but for sure through the chat you can submit your questions, and or you can email Daniel and I, and we'll be happy to pass the questions on to Edrizio. So with that, so Edrizio, you have a wonderful story, and you know, you've done a number of things on the entrepreneurial side. When I think of you, I think of many founders that are out there that have ventured in the journey you have completed on your first phase. Some of them are still fighting through it. Some of them have dropped out of the race. Some of them are just getting in. Maybe we can start with your journey, talking a little bit about you know, what were some of the early challenges, your inspiration, your drive. I mean, which is amazing. In getting from inception stage to actually selling the company. So maybe a little bit of that, and also share a bit about your growth phase, how you grew and how you eventually got acquired. So share your journey, basically.
Fantastic. Well, Danny, first of all, thank you for having me. Always good to see you. Always good to talk to you. And yeah, happy to see so many entrepreneurs on the call. So yeah, I'll share a little bit about my background, and then some of the key things I learned in my trajectory, and then would love to hear your questions. And as I speak, please put questions in the chat. I want to make this as interactive as possible. But as Danny mentioned, Dominican immigrant, grew up in Santo Domingo. My first startup was selling guayabas on the streets. I used to sell it when I was 11 years old. Immigrated to Harlem when I was 12. Harlem in the 90s was not what it was today. You know, very dangerous place. I learned a lot, saw a lot. Had a lot of run-ins with the police, with gangs. Lost some friends, but gained new perspective. I joined the Air Force at age 18. Dropped out a year later to become an aircraft mechanic, and I did that for the next 6 years of my life. That was my entire world was becoming an aircraft mechanic. So I was a blue collar worker for a good chunk of my life. I was 24, 25, and decided to go back to college when I was about 22. So I wound up doing college and working as a mechanic at the airport overnight. So I worked midnight shift, and I did school in the morning. And the more I went to school, the more drive I collected, the hungrier that I got, but I didn't have a specific direction. And that's when I started learning about investment banking. And what kind of struck me about investment banking was the fact that it was just an environment of successful people. It wasn't so much about the money or the prestige. It was more about being surrounded by successful people. But of course, they didn't have room for a little Dominican kid with an accent. But didn't matter. Kept knocking on every door. Got rejected multiple times. Wound up making the jump into investment banking, JP Morgan. Then ultimately made the transition into business school. I wanted to go to an Ivy League, and I got the opportunity to go to the Wharton School, where I quickly felt kind of out of place, and intimidated. But it was great because I was surrounded by really smart people, and it's easier to learn when you're surrounded by people who are smarter than you. After I finished school, I was very motivated to try something new. I had spent the last 5 years in finance, and I wanted to work on something very meaningful. And that's when I started thinking about remittances. as I said earlier, I had grown up in the VR, very humble. I grew up receiving money from my dad, who just passed away a couple months ago, and I was just kind of flabbergasted by the fact that the process of remittances had not evolved from the point I had immigrated to the States to when I had finished business school 20 years later. So I decided, why can I change it? So I decided to build a company to go and change it, called Regali. In 2013, we applied to every accelerator, got rejected by every accelerator, applied to one, the last one that didn't reject us. And luckily that one was Y Combinator in Silicon Valley. For context, there's about 1,000 unicorns in the world. Y Combinator has incubated 10% of them. So 1 in 10 unicorns at YC. Companies like Coinbase, Airbnb, DoorDash, Stripe, the list goes on and on, have all come from YC. And even back then, it was already a known brand. So I knew that I was in for quite an experience. The minute that I got in there, I quickly felt out of place again. I was definitely the dumbest person in the room, let me tell you that. And just for context, they break you down into groups of 5. And one of the companies in my group was a company that ultimately became DoorDash. So it was incredible to be surrounded by that level of entrepreneur. So you quickly saw that the bar was not here, but it was here. And when that happens, you can either get scared, step back, or you can rise up to the challenge. And we definitely did the latter. We came out of there, wound up raising a big seed round, $3 million, but wound up pivoting because the model that we initially had just did not work. So we wound up doing our first pivot and wound up, cutting the team in half. And that included my own brother. It's very painful. But after that, we had pivoted into another B2C model. And a year later, had to pivot again because we got subpoenaed by the New York State Banking Department because we were doing things without being licensed in the New York State. Even though there was not clear directive for what we were doing cross-border bill pay. And there was not a clear directive in any kind of legal documents that was a regulated entity, a regulated process. We got subpoena and we quickly changed the model and we had to pivot again now into B2B. And we decided to change the name of the company because we no longer want to associate it with the previous brand, from Regali to Arcus. And we started really growing and scaling. And in 2017, we were ready to raise our Series A. So Series A is typically between $10 and $20 million. You're doing $1 to $2 million of revenue. And we had met all the metrics. So we went out there to raise the Series A, went to San Francisco, had like 10 meetings, no result, 20 meetings, no results, 80 meetings, no results, 100 meetings, no results, 140 meetings, no results, 145 meetings, one yes. And I remember like it was yesterday, I got my first yes with a term sheet, $10 million term sheet from a big bank in the US. And I just got married. Like, what more can a guy ask, right? I've never seen a term sheet for that amount. And I was really excited. But those term sheets are non-binding and they are subjected to a 2-month due diligence. So as time went on, the bank started asking more and more questions. And we noticed that they were a little bit more hesitant. And with 3 days left to close, I was actually scheduled to go to a conference in Phoenix in September 2017 to announce the deal I had with the bank and the financing. And I got a call on my cell phone, and it was my representative from the bank telling me that they no longer were going to do the deal. And I could not believe it. Like the rug had been pulled from under me. There was zero explanation given. It was just, we're a bank that's within our We don't need to tell you that. Zero feedback, no context, just we're not going to do the deal. Meanwhile, I had a staff of about 30 people, all salaried employees, and we have about 3 weeks of runway. So I had to get on a plane, go to Phoenix, and a trip that was originally a celebration trip quickly became a desperation trip. I talked to everybody that would talk to me. Everyone said maybe, no, or hell no. One investor said, could work, but you got to meet my partners in Mexico. So from Phoenix to Mexico, I decided to take the first flight out that evening. And if any of you can remember what happened in Mexico around September 2017, there was an earthquake. That was the day that I was flying. And as I was flying, the pilot announced that we were going to have an emergency landing at Mexico City Airport. And we did. And luckily, we were okay. But my meeting was canceled. All my meetings were canceled. And I remember calling the investor, telling him, listen, I need to still meet. And he was, obviously, his mind was not meeting. Mexico went through just a terrible earthquake. But in my mind, I was like, I will not get on a plane until I have a resolution for this. I will not face my team until I solve this problem. Lo and behold, I just stuck around. I stuck around until they gave me a meeting. They gave me a meeting. It was my first meeting in Spanish, and sure enough, by the time I got back to the airport, they had called me and they were in for 3 million. That's all I needed. You can get many no's, but sometimes all you need is one yes. And I took that one yes and was able to get another 5 million committed and wound up raising an $8 million A. And after that, we were kind of off into the races. A few years later in 2020, we were growing and scaling. We were ready to raise a Series B. Series B typically is between $20 and $40 million. You are giving up around 20% of the company. And you should be doing between $5 and $10 million in revenue. So again, we had kind of checked all the boxes, and we were again ready to raise our Series B. But my wife was expecting, so I told her, like, come with me to San Francisco. We flew over to San Francisco, rented an Airbnb. I would take meetings during the day, stay with her at night. And after a couple of weeks had passed, March 2020 came. I remember we were getting her sonogram, and the doctor just kind of paused, and she told us that we couldn't find a heartbeat, lost the baby. And was devastated, really was stuck with like grief, but we couldn't even respond to that because the very next day, the president of the U.S. made an announcement that was a national state of emergency. And we decided, well, we're going to leave the country, and I need my wife to be surrounded by people by a whole community that cares. So let's just go back to the DR. So we left in San Francisco in the middle of the night, left their Airbnb just empty, and landed in Santo Domingo like 2 days later because he had to do a bunch of flights. And that was my reality now. I had to go raise a Series B from my wife's mom's house in Santo Domingo. Was having a bunch of calls, but at the same time, things with my co-founders were not great. I thought that it had taken us way too long to raise a Series B. I had made some calls product-wise that had not panned out. So conversations led to arguments. Arguments led to just fights that had not been for Zoom, it would have been physical. Like, I'm pretty sure like it was at that level, like the degree of animosity and tension was through the roof. And I wound up kind of having to part ways with one of my co-founders, who was like one of my best friends. That was heartbreaking. And my other co-founders just wanted me out of there. And I also was sick with COVID, and I had just lost my grandmother to COVID. So all of these things happening at the same time really kind of like just almost pushed me to the brink of like mental collapse, like pushed me to the brink. You know, I had not known what depression was up until that point. Like I'm a fairly resilient individual, but that was it really took a chunk out of me. Like I did not want to get out of bed for days, weeks. I remember I was in the hospital recovering from COVID, and I came across this book called Meditations. It was written by Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor about a millennia ago. And I was just breezing through it. And there was a quote in one of the chapters that said that the action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. And it really stuck with me because it felt like it spoke to me, because every single time there was an obstacle, I figure a way through it, right? I didn't just go and say, this is not, I'm going to stop. And I figure, you know, that the life is like a video game, right? You play video games, we know that every single level is harder than the last one. And you will get to a level that ultimately seems insurmountable, right? Whether you're playing Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog, you get to a level where you get stuck. Like, that's good. Like, that means you gotten really far. And what worked for you at the last level doesn't work for you at this level. But if you can pass this level, you will unlock things and skills that you didn't even know you had. So I decided to go back to the board, ask my job back. Sure enough, I wound up raising our biggest round of capital from SoftBank and Citi, got an offer from Amazon for a Series B, and then got an offer from MasterCard for an acquisition. All happened almost in sequence, like magic. I kid you not. And wound up taking the acquisition offer, which was supposed to be a few months. And it's going to be great. We're going to be done by Christmas. Christmas came, 3 months came, nothing happened. Then 6 months passed, nothing happened. 12 months passed, nothing happened. 18 months passed, nothing happened. Until it was November 2021. I was in a position where I thought I was going to get fired from a job. My wife had lost a job. I thought I was going to be like on the unemployment line. Like that was going to be my reality. Right? Until we got a letter from the government in Mexico into our office telling us that like the one thing that we needed to do was to get the sale approved was approved. And it was the Thanksgiving week. I called up my lawyer and like, whatever you got to do, we need to close this week. And we were like, well, this is a big company. It's a holiday, Thanksgiving. They're not going to do something of this magnitude, much less announce it during Thanksgiving week. That's ridiculous. I'm like, no, we need to do it. I don't know what's going to happen. And to their credit, they moved 50 lawyers into a call on Thanksgiving week. I don't know how, but they did it. Completed the checklist, and literally the next day we announced it on Bloomberg, and that's when I knew it was like real. When I saw the ticker, MasterCard buys Arcus, shares go up 3%. That's when I knew it was real. And it was one of the single most rewarding experiences I ever had, because you know, as they say, that the sweet ain't as sweet without the sour, and Lord knows I had a lot of sour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story and an amazing experience for you. Talk about overcoming a lot of unexpected circumstances on the personal and on the startup side. Is really impressive. I think the average person tends to divert or give up, and you know, it's really, I think that's a skill of founders, right? Always finding the way to continue forward. So that's really impressive.
Always find a way. Amen to that.
Yes. I'm curious, one question for you. So you talked about and I'll make a segue here, and then we can continue with the next section. But you talked about how you worked with Y Combinator. And so I've had advisors that are completely on board with partnering with an accelerator like Y Combinator. I'm not being specific about Y Combinator in general, but just accelerators in general. And there's two schools of thought. They fast track you and do great for you. And the other one is that, they take equity away. You got to follow their rules. And ultimately you end up handing the keys of the kingdom to them. That's one perspective that I've heard before. And, you're not going to get as much as you can. My perspective is different, but I'm interested, if you were talking to a founder that's kind of on the fence about to go with an accelerator or not, what would be your advice?
In general, well, I'm biased having been through one and having worked at one, but it depends on the accelerator, and it depends what are the people mentoring. Most of them have relatively standard terms. You're looking at between 125 to 500K for 7 to 9%. So they're relatively in that ballpark. So the difference really comes into who is the person mentoring and how strong is the network that you're going to get after. I've seen a lot of accelerators where the person mentoring is not an ex-founder. And I say this a lot on my LinkedIn posts is it's very hard to advise people on something that you've never done before. Like Brian Chesky from Airbnb says that all the time. Is like, look, I have front seat row at the Golden State Warrior games and I watch basketball every day, but I'm not the guy you're going to go to for basketball advice. I'm just an observer. So YC has a different approach where if you're a partner, you're a very successful founder. And only partners can talk to founders. They go to an extreme where YC, we used to have like an admissions team and an outreach team that would talk to founders. Now they just took that away. Now everybody who talks to a founder has to be a partner.
Mm.
And there's inverse, like Techstars, where just anyone can talk. They have like mentors who are salespeople, and I feel like that is more bad than good. That they give you advice that sounds good, but it's not. So, and everything stems from that. Like, so if you have that, you're gonna have a very strong community. So I would just think through that. So like the terms are the same, it's just the people are different.
Yeah. Another question on a kind of a topic of discussion among founders. There's a perception that Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, it's almost expected that if you got your MBA there, your likelihood of success with a startup is very high because of your network. What's your perspective on that? I mean, what would you say to a Colombian based out of Orlando who's doing a startup and doesn't have that blue blood school cadre his credentials and doesn't have the network that those schools bring along? What's your perspective there? Does it really make a big difference, or does it reduce the likelihood of success and access?
I would say difference. It doesn't make as big a difference as people think. I think having gone to an Ivy League school, like like I went to both extremes. I went to both, probably the worst. I went to a community college when I was 22, and I got to go to the Ivy League school that was ranked #1 in the world. So there's a huge difference in the difference between those two is not so much the education or the professors, it's the people around you. When I went to community college, the people around me were like, ex-convicts, people in their 30s or 40s trying to figure out their life and trying to get their lives in a row. When I went to business school at Wharton, the people there were CIA agents, ex-NFL players, doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, politicians, like the operational society. So, and then me, like this random Dominican kid from Harlem. So, humans are social animals. We adapt quickly to environments, which is one of the biggest things I've learned. I talk about this in the book is get in the right room. Who you spend time with, who you become. So if you don't have that background, and I say this in the book, is, build it artificially. Put yourself in a room with other really smart entrepreneurs, right? So it's a matter of like figuring out who those people are.
Got it. Thanks for that. Maybe move on to the second section. We spent about 10 minutes here. And it's talk a little bit about your sort of your biggest learnings and sort of lessons learned along the way. What were your, you shared some of them already in your journey, but what are things that you would have done differently, and things that you probably would have done in addition to what you already did, your prior startups, things that you missed out on that you now look back and say, I should have done it this way or that way. There are people who struggle always looking back, and there are people who never look back. And I think you got to have a balance of those. So what's your perspective there? What are some of the, if you were to think of your top 3 lessons learned, what would those be?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I mean, I had to for the book. So one of them was just the team. So again, try to work with people that are better than you in some capacity. Try to bring people who are not guest people, who work challenge you, and people who compliment you, and put you outside of your comfort zone. In the sense of tech, like a team that's more tech than less tech, like more technical than less technical is always better. And our first startup, that was a mistake. We had more business people than technical people. The other thing I would say is assume that you don't have product market fit until you don't think about it. Like be very kind of militant about it. Like don't think because you have some growth, you have product market fit. Always challenge yourself and keep asking, like, are we building something people really want? Are they coming back? Are they referring other people? Until you get to the point where you're not thinking about it. And just be very challenge yourself about it, because it's not guaranteed you're gonna get there. And it took us a long time to figure that out. And the other thing, this one's kind of weird because I'm in my second startup now, and it's like the whole notion of like this is gonna be 7 to 10 years. To like, you can pause every now and then. You can go really fast and pause. And I just went like 100 miles an hour, and I just wound up getting burned out. So like it's very important to kind of like take those pauses. I make sure that other people take those pauses, so you can kind of take a step back, breathe, think about things differently, and come back. And I think that's just a smarter way of building a company than doing what I did.
Yes, that's helpful. As you went through this, managing the expectations of investors and keeping true to your vision and mission versus what investors sometimes tend to do, which is try to delineate what you should be doing because of their perspective on your business model. How do you balance that?
Yeah, we had got a lot of investors. We wound up raising about $25 million. We had Andreessen Horowitz, YC, Kapora Capital, Winklevoss, Initialized. So we had a lot of smart people on the cap table. And a lot of the advice is really good. Obviously, these people are top 1% investors in the world. A lot of their advice is really good, but ultimately it is only advice. I mean, you're the captain of the ship. You have to take all the information. You have to figure out what's useful, what's ignore, what's not, and then you have to recommunicate that to investors. right? I think investors just want to know that they've been heard. People want to know they've been listened to. And if you can come back to them with data points illustrating why you're not taking their advice, I think it's easy.
Good. So having gone through this whole journey and gone through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, you then set out to write a book.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what inspired you to go through that drill, because it takes a lot of work and effort, and I read through most of it, and it's really well written.
Thank you.
There's a lot of connotations to Latin culture that only someone like you I would understand. So I was looking at it saying, well, some people that grew up in Connecticut would not be able to understand some of these things.
Yeah.
But it's outstanding in being sort of a source of drive and inspiration, especially for people who are coming from humble roots like yourself and myself and others. I think it's interesting. So what drove you to write the book? And by the way, so the audience knows this, when he first launched the book in the first year or so, and then for some time thereafter, he was actually selling more books than Peter Thiel with 0 to 1. So that's quite a feat.
Thank you. Thank you, brother.
It was considered one of the Amazon bestsellers, and if you look at the link that we shared on the chat, you'll see the details behind that. So what inspired you to do this?
Well, thank you for that. So the book actually was very organic. I remember throughout my 9 years as an entrepreneur, I used to write a lot of journal entries. I had read that Abraham Lincoln used to do something similar, where he used to write journal entries and he would just pour all his anger. Because he was a very calm guy. He would pour his anger into a letter. He would read it to his wife and then put it in a cabinet and not share it with anybody. I did something similar. So I wound up writing all these journal entries. And when I sold the company, I looked at them again and it was like, wow, this is very dark, but very interesting. And like humans, we have a short-term memory for pain. This is why I always say this is why women get pregnant multiple times. We forget the pain very quickly. And so I knew that I'm glad I wrote those things in the moment, because if I wrote it from hindsight, I don't think I would have been able to really capture how bad the pain was. So I just took all those kind of random journal entries from different places and kind of poured it into what initially was just going to become blogs. And I was like, okay, now this is a whole story. So I started first of all, learning how to write a book. So I took classes for that. And started learning, okay, this is how you write a story. And then I had the option of going with a publishing agent, but I decided, well, I'm not doing this to make money. I'm doing this to share a very raw story. So I'm going to self-publish, because I feel like this is the book that I wish I had when I was 21. Like somebody needs to write something like this, because I felt like, man, like books can transform lives. I wanted to do something that would transform a life and take somebody from going this direction to going this direction. So with that, I was like, I'm going to pour everything I got into the book, and I'm going to just rip it, man. I'm just not going to hold anything back. And if it's the last thing I write, let it be something that I'm proud of, right? If something happens to me and that's the last thing that I have on this earth, let it be something that I'm proud of. People, so that was my approach, and thankfully people reacted well to it.
Yeah, I read your last section, the conclusion, twice, because it was very strong. It just kind of put it all together for someone who's a founder, and it was really thoughtful and inspiring. Let me ask you one more question about the book. So I'm sure you look back at what you wrote and what's out there. How much of this experience do you think has made you a much stronger founder in what ways has it made you a stronger founder? I know you're working on something, and I'll let you to the level that you're comfortable talk about on what you're working on, because I know it's not something you are widely open about, but I think it's important for people to know that you're onto something new, and people like myself and others are trying to support you on that in different ways with knowledge, contact network, or money, right? But how are you applying the lessons learned to your next round, and what would you say is probably the one thing that you value the most out of the first experience?
It's a lot. I think for me it was different than most entrepreneurs who go from company one to company two, because I had the opportunity to go to YC and then get to interact with other founders who also like were successful, and I quickly learned from when I went to YC and I worked with other group partners. I learned that the degree of pain I experienced is not unique. Like, I'm not alone. Like, it's quite common. It's quite common. Like, I've heard of people having panic attacks and having to go to the hospital and having depression. So it was like, thought of bingo, basically. Tell me all the symptoms you've gone through. And then I got to write the book. And so that even became more introspective. So I was very self-conscious of my mistakes, subconscious of how to adapt to the market. So all those things in mind, I just had like a very strong desire to kind of not fix those things, but man, if I ever get another chance, this is what I would do different. This is what I would do different. So yeah, I came across an opportunity. I worked in remittances, I worked in payments, and now there's new technology with stable coins, crypto, and one of the founders that I had mentored was building something in crypto, and I joined them. I joined them as a CEO late last year, and we've been growing very well. And every single mistake I made, every single error, I've tried to correct as much as possible here. And I'm having the time of my life. It is so much fun building again. It's just a different perspective.
Thank you for that. Good. So we'll open it up for questions. Daniel, you might have your own set of questions as well. So I'll ask you to intervene as sort of moderator as well. And then we'll go into wrap up. We got about 15 minutes left. Before we do that, anything you want to add, Edrizio, before we go into a Q&A that you didn't cover?
No, I've talked too much already. So we got talk.
Thank you. Cool. Great.
So I have a question, Edrizio. It's about the fundraising. People think that coming to Silicon Valley, you just have to do that and the money is pouring in. But actually, it's very different. So you explained that you had almost a deal. So can you explain a little bit more in detail the process of fundraising from, Y Combinator is a great, I did the startup school, so I was close to that at some point. And it's a great network. It's you have a lot of energy. You have at the end of the boot camp, you have also the investor demo day. So how important was it for raising money and after that? Can you explain a little bit the process of that?
The process of going through accelerator or the process of raising capital?
No, raising capital specifically.
Yeah. So I'll tell you like the wrong process, which is what I try, and what I've since learned is the right process. The wrong process, which is what I try, is like, hey, we're kind of running out of money. I need to raise money. Let me go put together a quick deck and then figure out who would take meetings with me. And that is what led to what I highlighted earlier, 10 meetings, 20 meetings, 50 meetings, 100 meetings. And the reason that process doesn't work because it's not a process. It's not thought out. You have not thought through the multiple scenarios. You have not thought through the stakeholders on the other side, what they're looking for and how they're looking for, and how things need to be communicated. Some years later, I went to YC, and what I learned the right process is you need to create a process that maximizes leverage on your side and minimizes risk. Maximize leverage, you need to dramatically reduce the scope of time from which you are racing to the point that you finalize race. Time is your enemy as a founder. The more you're out there, the lower your chances. So the best process is when you say, I want to raise, how much do you want to raise and what's for, right? Let's figure that out first. And you have a plan A and plan B, right? Plan A is like your pie in the sky number, and plan B is like your bare minimum. And that's what you need to operate. So you'll be happy just with that, but you say to the world, I'm going to raise my plan. Then you need to carve out all your investors, that your investor universe, that should be 100, if not 200. Mind you, there's 4,000 VCs in the United States alone. So I'm sure you can find 200 people that will invest in you, right? And make sure that they are in your stage and in your sector and in your region, right? Those three factors.
But
Most people, a lot.
Because when you have an investor on board, and maybe not at the seed level, but Series A and after, it's like a wedding. You're going to live together for a certain period of time, maybe 10 years. So is it something you consider when selecting an investor, or you say, no, I don't want this kind of investors, and I'm not even going to talk to them, or the money is the money, and if they accept, I'm going to take it in.
I think it depends. I think when you're early and if you're getting safe, there's nothing that the investor has zero control. None, actually. They give you the money, that's it. So at the beginning, just optimize for speed. I think if, like me, I'm a second-time founder, I optimize for speed and valuation, but I would not optimize for speed, valuation, and brand. No founder has gotten big because they picked the best investors. None that I know of. But just get the money in, get it quickly within market terms, and move on. So you don't optimize for brand until later. The most investors don't have that much value. So, but yeah, like I said, there's a process to it, and you should follow the process.
Danny, you have another question?
In other words, money is money.
Money is money. Money is money.
I think we have a couple of questions from the audience. I'll go ahead and relay the first one there. This one's coming from Patrice. Thank you, Patrice, for joining. Did you create and are keeping now a list of potential acquirers for your ventures? Were you expecting MasterCard to be a potential acquirer?
No, when we were in 2020, the business was doing pretty well, and we were not looking to sell. We didn't start building a list of acquirers until we got an offer to be acquired to build leverage. So the business was doing pretty well, and we had multiple offers of just fundraising, none in M&A, but when we got that M&A offer. But yeah, it is good to, once you make the decision, is you need to make sure that you are buttoned up to go through the process, because I mean, the bigger your acquisition, the more buttoned up you're going to be. And if you're going to sell to a publicly traded company, you need to be very buttoned up.
Good. Thanks for that. Patrice, if you have a follow-up, feel free to add that. Then the second question from the audience is an anonymous attendee. You pivoted from Regali to Arcus, B2C to B2B. What business approach is more challenging and why? on these fronts, raising funds, building the technology, consumer acquisition strategies, etc. So again, you pivoted reality from B2C and B2B. What business approach is more challenging and why on these fronts, specifically raising funds?
That's a good question. So the business that I just joined was B2C, and I told them you need to pivot to B2B. That's partly personal because I feel like I'm better at selling to businesses than selling to consumers. And both have challenges, right? But with B2C, the challenge is, of course, you got to attract customers. If you're in fintech, especially cross-border, it's challenging because most of the customers are not tech savvy. You're prone to errors. You're prone to fraud. A lot of fraud. And it's hard to retain customers and expensive to acquire them. If you're B2B, it's hard to attract, but there's a high ROI per every customer, and you're not exposed to fraud because that's on the B2C side. You're exposed to regulations, but if you can focus on that, then you can do a good job. So I think a matter of personal preference. I'm a B2B guy. I'm an infrastructure fintech guy through and through. But they say consumers coming back now, so
Got it.
Could be different.
So you got two questions from. Thank you for that. Two questions from Juan Pujol. And he's got kind of an investment banker background, but also he's got a strong founder experience through some of the ventures that he supports. So the two questions are: where were you cash flow positive when you sold to MasterCard, and how did MasterCard set your price, to the extent that you can share any of that?
No, we weren't cash flow positive. Very few startups are. I mean, whatever cash flow we made, we poured it back into the business.
Okay.
And
What year
obviously
did you sell again?
It was 21.
Okay.
So I felt like the peak of the
How did
market.
they set the price then?
I mean, back then, you had like insane multiples, right? Like, you have 20, 30x multiple on revenue. So we were very lucky, to say the least. Yeah.
Can you share the range of multiple that you were in?
I mean, we were in that range.
Okay, got it.
But I have a very tight NDA.
Somewhere between 20 to 30, you said?
X multiple.
X multiple. Okay, got it.
Yeah, 20, 30. That was the market multiple, and
Okay.
Whatever revenue we were making, we got a pretty handsome multiple on that.
Great. We got 4 minutes left before we wrap up.
I have another question, if I may, Danny.
Yes.
So, which is very specific to the fintech and payments world. You can do B2B enterprise solution. It's pretty easy. You just integrate your software and you're done. But with payments and when you move money, you have a whole set of compliance associated. And when you're a startup, you may not have all the compliance that a bank that you need to partner with requires. So can you explain a little bit how you manage to start and move money but get banks to accept your solution?
Very long story. A lot of it I cover in the book, but yeah, I started the wrong way, which is try to circumvent compliance, which almost landed me in Yale. Chapter 4 and 5 of the book. Then pivoted to just providing B2B bill pay to banks in Mexico. And we decided to get an MTL in Mexico in order to move the money, and ultimately added what's called an IFPay, which is like an e-money license, like a banking license for fintechs. And we went from like being compliance allergic to kind of compliance center, like from not getting any regulations to getting all of the regulations. Being very buttoned up, like became PCI level 1, became SOC type 2, ISO 2700, like every single certification you can think of. So we just became a very buttoned up organization, scaled up to like 110 people, 200 customers, worked at like 90% of the banks in Mexico, most fintechs, most retailers. We just became the de facto product on bill pay. But yeah, being compliant and being regulated really helped.
And now when you talk about your new company, maybe without disclosing too much, but
Yeah.
you have the movement of money and you have the crypto side. I'm on the
Yeah.
board of a company. We do tokenization of assets, so I know the requirements that we have to face to be able to be SEC compliant in this particular case. But so how do you manage the compliance side in this environment?
Yeah, no, we're an MTL, right? So we have a crypto license as well. But as stable coins are still a question mark when it comes to regulations, our approach is that we try to get ahead of it. We try to be as compliant forward as we can be, and try to treat it as if it was already regulated. Like if stablecoin was a regulated currency like fiat, how would it look like? And that's how we're operating with. And I think that would give us a kind of a moat and strategic advantage over anybody else that's not ready when it comes, because we do believe it's going to come. It's just a matter of.
Perfect. Okay, we're at time. I'll just, before I close, I'll just restate something, a quote you stated, which is very powerful. It's on page 200 of your book, right at the end. And you know, it's preceded by this paragraph, which I think is worthwhile reading. Finally, take all the punches in stride. No one expects to exit the ring without a single scratch or bruise. You won't grow your startup without fighting through some obstacles. Consider every impediment to action as an honorable, worthy opponent here to hone your strength. When Marcus Aurelius said, and this is the quote, "What stands in the way becomes the way," he may not have been thinking about fintech startups, failed term sheets, and M&A due diligence, but the one line that helped, that's the one line that helped me return to the fighting surface after a cascade of blows that nearly put me under. And that's really strong. I mean,
Wow, man.
Wonderful
I get
quote,
shivers.
wonderful
Shivers.
experience. And I'm sure it brings back a lot of good and sour memories, but look at
Yeah.
where you landed. So a lot of respect
Thank you.
to you,
Appreciate it.
and really appreciate you joining. Anything you want to leave us with today? And there's the link to your outstanding book. Any final one-liner statements that you want to share with the group and you want to leave us with?
No. I mean, I'll share my LinkedIn. Please contact me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. I love helping founders.
Thank you, Edrizio. You've been very generous with your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Okay. And I'm
Yes,
going to close
bye.
the session. So I put in the chat the link to your book. So if people want to take a look and even buy it, it's easy.
Okay.
And remember also we recorded the session, so it will take us a few days before it's available. But you can go to youtube.com/ConnexAmericas and you will get access to the whole webinar. And here is also our contact information if you need to if you want to participate or help us in our mission. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Edrizio, again for an insightful lessons learned on your journey. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.